everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome back to another Port Moody Public Library Book Chat Summer Reading Club edition. Now, before we reveal what books we'll be talking about today, let's take a look at who's on our panel again. Surprise, surprise. Hi, everybody.
It's us again. Who would have thought?
It's so different. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
I'm wearing a different shirt.
Faces, different wardrobe to make it look like we actually, have other clothes besides our sweats.
I don't own any sweatpants.
I feel very sad for you. We need to rectify that, Corrine. But before we go shopping, we're here to talk Spaceopoly again. Woo! Now today we will be talking about two categories that are on our green spaces. And one of those is books by a Black author. And we'll also be talking about books by an author of Asian descent. So I don't know about everybody here, but did you also really struggle with choosing just one book for each category?
Yes. It's awful.
It was a nightmare. A nightmare. So hard. So hard.
I feel like this is something we go through every week.
There are no easy categories. It's just not possible.
Nope, but these are our picks for you all today. So we hope you'll enjoy them. We'd love to hear also what maybe your picks are for these categories and perhaps introduce us to some books that we should be reading as well. Yes. So with that, let's talk about books by a Black author. And we'll start today with Fiona.
Hello. So I have chosen a comic book today, but it is a fantastic comic book series called March, and it is by John Lewis and Andrew Aiden, and with art done by Nate Powell. So John Lewis, of course, is Congressman John Lewis, who unfortunately passed away very recently. And this is an autobiographical comic in conjunction with Andrew Aiden. So they worked together on it. And it looks both at the present of John Lewis's life as a congressman, and then goes into his life and experience with the civil rights movement. So it is in 3 volumes, and they're all equally fantastic. The first one is about John Lewis's early life and when he meets Martin Luther King. So it starts out with him as a kid living on a farm, feeding chickens, and he has a family who really wants him to just sort of keep his head down. And it follows his life as he becomes more involved in the civil rights movement. I found it really interesting because it looked a lot at nonviolent protest, and in especially with the pictures, just such a detailed way. It was really fascinating and really interesting. Something I would totally recommend to anyone. I loved it because it kind of gave me a window into the civil rights movement, particularly Selma, and the second one is about the Freedom Riders, and it was my favorite one because they're all on a bus, just touring the Deep South. So it was really great, and it just gives you that window. It felt like it introduced me to all sorts of things that I didn't know about. So it was like a starting point for me to then go read a whole bunch more about the civil rights movement. And it was neat to have the perspective of someone who actually knew Martin Luther King, and like, you know, John Lewis totally idolizes him, but then he also becomes one of his contemporaries. And you know, he's a bit younger, so he's really seeing him from this this position where he's his total idol, and then eventually they're working together. So definitely something I would recommend to people, even if you're a little bit afraid of comic books and graphic novels. It's such a great place to start learning about the civil rights movement.
That sounds very cool.
Thanks, Fiona, my fellow graphic novel aficionado. It sounds like a great compilation by John Lewis there. Now we're going to switch gears to a different genre, but also by a Black author. And next up is Corinne.
Yes, I am very excited to be representing genre fiction today, I think, along with some of our other picks. But I am choosing a mystery. And the book that I am choosing to promote today is Hollywood Homicide by Kellye Garrett. It is first in a series. The series is called Detective by Day Mystery. And it is about Dana Anderson. And everywhere she goes, whether she is shopping or a gas station or in the washroom, people come up to her and ask, "Do I know you from somewhere? Are you famous?" And no, you don't know her from somewhere. You didn't go to high school with her. And is she famous? That is a little bit debatable. So a couple years back, Dana starred in a very lucrative, very famous chicken ad. Think of like your "what's up" kind of heights of commercial success and recognition. But unfortunately, her career has fizzled a little bit since then, and she is a bit stuck and stalled out in LA. Her parents are also a bit in financial straits, and Dana is struggling to even put gas in her car. So going back to the chicken ad seems pretty good right now if they will have her. However, one night coming back with her friends, she witnesses a hit and run that ends in the death of the pedestrian that is struck. When Dana learns of the $15,000 reward posted for any information that leads to the solving of the case, she decides to pick up a little PI work on the side. After all, there are weirder things that struggling actresses have done for money. She teams up with an oddball PI to track down the clues and the culprit while attending a few movie premieres, doing some vintage shopping, and maybe finding love. The closest equivalent that I can kind of describe this to is the Janet Ivanovich Stephanie Plum series. It's snappy and funny, and I love that it really shows you the less glamorous, more working side of LA. Dana is such like a warm, genuine character, but she's so funny. And the author, Kellye Garrett, is a TV writer who lives in LA. So that comes across so well in the book. Like, you would love to watch this particular series of Dana Anderson mysteries. It could run for 11 seasons. It could be the next Murder, She Wrote. It's just so fun. So if you're looking for like a smart, snappy, cozy mystery to pick up, I would definitely suggest looking into this series.
Great, thank you, Corinne.
You're welcome, Liz.
I love how you name dropped Murder, She Wrote. So that's high praise, in my opinion, for your book.
Murder, She Wrote is the greatest series of all time. Jessica Fletcher is the best detective, hands down, best human being that we have been graced with.
I feel like we could do a whole episode on that, but we're going to have to move on right now. And next up, I believe we have Virginia.
Of course. Now for something completely different. So I picked the Prey of Gods by Nicky Drayden for this category. And this is her debut novel. Nicky Drayden, I read one of her other book, and she's probably going to be the person that I'll read everything and anything that she writes. She's amazing. I don't know where to begin to tell you about this book, because this is just the most banana pants book that I've ever read in my life. One of the most banana pants, just like her other book. So this, maybe you can tell from the cover, it's science fiction. It is set in future South Africa, where you got like a lot of new technology going on. There's renewable energy. There is like genetic engineering industry booming in this little town called Port Elizabeth. And there's everybody has a personal robots and all sorts of great technology. So it's a science fiction, but it is also a fantasy, because in the midst of this is where a demigoddess decides it is time for her to come back to the world and reclaim her power and show herself so that people can worship her. So it is fantasy, science fiction. I don't know. It's a genre bender for sure. So the story has sort of, from the point of view of 5 different characters. We have Musi, who is a teenager raised in a very traditional family, and he is, you know, experimenting as a teenager with drugs and, you know, other things, and also try to discover his own sexuality and having a lot of feelings for his best friend Elkins. And he's not really sure how that's going to go, because if he comes out, he know his family will probably be disappointed in him and that he might lose a best friend. So he's not really sure what's going on with that. Then there's Nombula, who discovers, with the help of this really strange, creepy man in town, that she's not just a human, and that she has these special powers, and she's trying to learn how to control it and also decide what she wants to do with this power that she has. Then we have Ria, a pop singer. She is, you know, having like, you know, she's at the top of her career. She's going to have like the biggest concert in Port Elizabeth. And she's just, everybody loves her. Everybody knows her songs. But she has multiple sclerosis. And so she's trying to hide that from everybody. And the only person that knows about it is her drug dealer, who is supplying her with drugs to numb the pain. And so she doesn't really know how long she can do this for. Then there's Wallace Stoker, a rising politician, who is, you know, everybody thinks he is so good, he should run for a premier, and he's having pressure from everywhere for him to go the next step, especially from his mother. But all he cares about is to nail this audition so that he could become the opening act for Ria as Felicity Lyons, the next pop diva that is going to dazzle the world with her song, her voice, and her dance moves. That's all he cares about. So he's trying to figure out, well, do I go with my own dreams or do I go with my mother's dreams? So with all of that, of course, there's also Sydney. Sydney, the aforementioned demigoddess who's trying to take over the world. During the day, she works at a nail salon, trying to make ends meet, and she can use her mind-reading power to find the best shade of the most complementary shade of nail polish that you can find for all the clients so that, you know, they can look fabulous. But at night, she is trying to grow her power, you know, one murder victim at a time, because there's only 2 ways a god can get power. One is by faith, by inspiring faith, by making people believe in you, or you can inspire fear. And of course, that's the easier route according to her. So she's going to choose that. And so it's up to the other 4 characters, to try to figure a way to, you know, like deal with Sydney, this rising goddess. And also, did I mention that there's also robots who are maybe becoming sentient and that they are probably staging an uprising right now? This book is, as I said, banana pants. It is just so crazy. There's like, I was like, how do you come up with this stuff, you know? But she is so good at just, you know, like coming up with fresh and new ideas. The book is hilarious. So if you think you have read everything in speculative fiction, if you think you know all the tropes, you know, like the storylines, I would suggest give this one a try. I bet you'll find something new to you. So this is The Prey of Gods by Nicky Drayden.
Wow, that does sound banana pants, for lack of a better word. But yeah, very interesting. It sounds fascinating, all these different storylines. So for those of you who are just tuning in again, we are talking about books by a Black author. And now let's see what Sadie has in store for us.
All right, so I've liberated the book from under my cat. who had decided that she was also a fan of my pick today. So I am going to be talking about A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. And this is the author's debut novel, and it tells the story of Alice, or Allison, but most commonly known as Alice. And the night that Alice's father died, in shock, Alice runs out of the hospital, hides herself in an alley to deal with her pain. She looks up to discover that a monstrous creature is sitting in front of her. And this monstrous creature looks like it is not very happy, and it is going to attack her. So just as it jumps up to kill Alice, this young man appears and kills the creature right in front of her. Alice is a little bit stunned. She's still dealing with her grief, and now she is dealing with a monstrous creature that has just been killed by someone who appeared out of nowhere right in front of her. So this young man, who introduces himself as Addison Hatta, introduces Alice to the world of Wonderland. Now, Wonderland, many years ago, was this beautiful dreamscape world ruled by the Queen of Hearts. She had 3 beautiful daughters. It was just a wonderful place. But then tragedy struck the royal family. In an attempt to gain back what the queen lost, she tries to get power and unfortunately becomes corrupted by that power, turning her into the Black Queen and causing Wonderland to go through a horrifying and devastating war. Now, the queen's daughters, the White Queen and the Red Queen, do manage to defeat their mother, and they bring the Wonderland back from this this horrible time. Now, present day, Alice is taken by Addison, and she is trained to be what is called a dream walker. Now, because of everything that happened in Wonderland, they have what are called nightmares, and these are human-created nightmares that take on a physical manifestation of a monstrous type creature. As a dreamwalker, it is Alice's job to go into Wonderland and defeat these monsters before they get a chance to come into
Hey, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Well, it unfortunately looks like we've had some technical difficulties midway through Sadie's book chat of A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. Hopefully Sadie will be able to reconnect because I'd love to hear her continue about what sounds to be a really interesting spin-off on the Alice in Wonderland story. Just bear with us a moment here. So Sadie, if you're out there, we know you are actually, please come back. All right, Sadie.
Sadie, come back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Sadie, come back to us.
And she did. So hopefully technical difficulties have subsided. So Sadie, if you wouldn't mind resuming
Yes.
about your book, I'd love to hear the rest of it.
Of course. So I'm not sure where exactly I cut out on this, but I will pick up. So now that Alice is a full-time dream walker, she goes into Wonderland and she defeats these creatures. However, Alice has decided that it's probably time for her to retire. Her mother is getting increasingly worried. In Alice's parallel life as a regular teenager, her mother gets very, very concerned, and then a Black teenager is shot and killed by the police in Atlanta. And this causes her mother to worry even more that Alice is going to be the next person. So Alice decides it is time for her to retire. So she goes to tell Addison that she's retiring, only to find that Addison has been poisoned. And it is up to Alice to try and find out how she can cure Addison. So now she is having to navigate Wonderland once again, at the same time as having to navigate her regular life as a teenager in Atlanta. And she goes on this journey through Wonderland in order to save Addison and save the Kingdom of Wonderland, which they're realizing is in much more trouble than they thought it was. This book is described by a lot of people as a mixture between Buffy, Vampire Slayer, and Alice in Wonderland. The character of Alice is often compared to the character of Buffy Summers. It's a really fun read if you are familiar with Alice in Wonderland, because you get a lot of very obvious references, as well as a lot of very kind of subtle references. So if you're familiar with the poetry of Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland, you'll find a lot of references there. It's fun trying to figure out which characters are which characters from the original story. Addison Hatta, I think, is pretty. It's pretty obvious who he is from the original. But yes, it's a very fun read. It's the first of a series, which, as I'm sure everybody knows by now, I love a good series. So I have not read the rest of them. I just finished this one a few weeks ago. So I'm very excited to read the rest of them and see what happens in Wonderland.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sadie. It sounds like a great pick today.
It is. It's very fun.
Well, changing gears again. Good. I'm so glad. I'm glad you were able to join us back again.
Me too.
So changing gears again, but still sticking with the category books by a Black author. Today I have a little something different for you for my pick. Now this one is a graphic novel series. Well, if you can call 2 books a series, and it's called Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. Now this, I gotta warn you, this series is different from the type of book I normally read. So if you've been tuning into our book chats, you'll know that I tend to read books that are sad or very contemplative, not your usual happy, joyful books. However, Check Please is the complete opposite of this. It is joyful, it is full of sports, hockey, which I love. It's got romance in it, hits lots of points that I don't usually get out of other books. And that was incredibly refreshing for me. So Check Please centers around Eric Biddle, AKA Biddy, because of course in the sports world, everybody has to have a nickname. And he, oddly enough, is a figure skater who has somehow ended up playing college hockey. So he's, of course, nervous about this change. So not only has he moved from out of state to go to college in a completely new place where he doesn't know anybody, but let's just say physically he isn't what you'd call traditionally built to be a hockey player. He is built to be a figure skater. So he's not only nervous about whether he will fit in off the ice with his teammates, living in their house, which is like a frat house slash hockey team house, but he's also nervous about his performance on the ice and whether he'll physically be able to survive those trials. However, through his love of baking and his kind nature, he does win over his teammates who realize what a great person he is, as well as a team player. And this really lifts Biddy up. Now he's assimilating into college life really well, fitting in with the team, and this is where the romance element comes in. So Biddy develops a crush on his team captain, Jack Zimmerman, who is an all-Canadian guy. Now he comes from a hockey family and he's slated to be a star being drafted into the big leagues. So the unnamed big leagues here, which I think most of us know what that is. However, Biddy's not sure about Jack's sexual orientation. So he's kind of coming to terms with these budding feelings and also his own sexuality and how that will affect his relationship with Jack as captain on the ice, as well as that of his teammates. So Biddy's going through a lot, but as I mentioned, this is a feel-good book, a feel-good series. Book 2 was recently released earlier this year, and it's called Sticks and Scones, and where you'll get to continue on with the story of Biddy. I'm not going to give anything away, but you definitely get lots more Biddy, lots more baking, and lots more hockey.
I have to say, I quite like Sticks and Scones. I'm a fan of the pun title, so that's good. That's good.
And yet you don't read Cozy Mysteries, which are all puns.
It's fair. That's fair. I can appreciate a good pun title, though, even if I don't read it.
It's kind of a prerequisite for working at the Port Moody Library. You have to be one with the puns.
Yeah.
Well, with that, so we've talked about our picks for books by Black author. Now let's, before we take a look at books by authors of Asian descent, I do have a question for everybody here today. A couple of questions, actually. And that's about your book buying habits. Now, it's a luxury that we can buy books, and we have a great library collection at our disposal. But if you do buy books, what compels you to buy a book? Like, what makes you want to buy it? And my other question for you is, would you buy a book that you haven't yet read? Let's see, Fiona, do you have strong feelings about this?
I have wishy-washy feelings, like most things. I don't buy a lot of books. I love having access to the library, and I read most of my books in that way. However, I have big dreams of like a beautiful library in which I collect all of the books that I like really love, and I love so much that I would recommend and loan out to other people. So I want to have like a big sofa and an armchair and a wall full of books, and like maybe a little cozy fireplace, and have people come into my home and be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting," and I'll be like, "Take it home with you, read it, bring it back, let me know how you felt about it."
So essentially, you want to start your own library. You're going to cede away from the Port Moody Library and start your own.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like graphic novels are a good thing to own, because the art is something you might want to take in over time or reference. And I belong to a book club that likes to read really obscure books, and so I have had to purchase things I haven't read for that book club, and I'm not really wild about that. If my book club is listening,
might be trying to change their habits a little bit there, Fiona.
Yeah.
Strong feelings from Fiona about buying books that she hasn't read yet. Interesting. All right, I see a library of sorts behind Virginia. What are your feelings?
So clearly, I don't buy any books. Never. Never. I don't buy any at all.
They're all books that you've taken from the library. And
that's right. Secretly just like pack away. Yeah, at the back there. Yes, I do buy a lot of books because I love books, not just so it doesn't really matter to me whether I have read them or not. In fact, I generally buy a lot of books that I have not read, probably. Just because I feel like then, I'm not like, if I already read it, I generally don't buy it unless it's like something that I know I really, really love, then I will have a copy. But usually books that I have not read, and in fact, most of these I have not read probably. But one day I'll get through all of them. I'm very surprised to hear Fiona said that you will want to have a library that you will, or like books that you will lend out to people, because I think there's going to be very, very few people that I'm willing to lend a book out to, because I just I have to watch you like read a book and how you deal with a paperback before I'm willing to lend out a book to you. Because even like watching my husband read, I'm like, hey, can you like can you like just peek inside? Like, because especially paperbacks like drive me crazy. So I'm like, no, you need to like really just, can you just like kind of like peek in there rather than like opening your book up? Like, how about no? So yeah, but yes, I love buying books, and like you said, Liz, very glad that like I love going to used bookstore to find like treasures and things that are out of print and all of that, to find things that I can't buy anymore. I do have to say, because it is kind of handy these days, so I do buy probably more ebooks than physical books, just because it's a little, in terms of space wise, I don't have space, so ebooks kind of help. So yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, Virginia. And Corrine, what are your thoughts about book buying and buying books you haven't read?
Oh, I buy tons of books I haven't read. Again, at some point I'll be able to retire, and then I'll just be able to go back and read all of them. But I want to make sure I've got them. I want to make sure that I've got them. Yeah, I've got tons of books that I haven't picked up yet, but I will. Yeah, I buy a lot of books. If I kind of average it out, it's usually about a book a week, because I just love them so much. And I kind of buy them for two reasons. One reason is because I want to read it. And the other reason is because I have already read it and I want to have it. So I know because we had this like horrible, awful, revelatory discussion last week that I'm the only person who rereads books. So I often buy books that I want to reread, that I want to have handy, that if I'm in the mood for 10 Years in the Bathtub, I want to have that handy. I need to read it now. Or if I want to go back and read all the Franny Fisher mysteries, I need them right now. I need them immediately and on hand. So I do buy a lot of books, but like Virginia, I'm extremely space challenged. So I happen to have to like pare it down a little bit. So I don't keep all the books that I buy. I'll often give them away or bring them to the library. But I do buy a lot.
Interesting. A book a week. Wow.
On average, because usually if I go to a bookstore, I'm bringing out a stack, baby. It's a stack.
Fair enough. Hard choices, right? And Sadie, are you a book buyer? Are you quite at the clip of Corrine, or are you more of a he, or not at all?
Not quite at Corrine's level. I don't buy as many books as I used to. So I think similar to Fiona, I do tend to get most of my books from the library now. Before I worked at a library, even though I had access to libraries before that, it wasn't until I started working at a library that I kind of switched those habits. But I used to buy a lot of books. Same with Virginia. I used to buy a lot of ebooks because space-wise, as well as I just would read quite a bit on my Kobo. These days, I actually tend to buy more books for other people and then get books given to me reciprocally. So Christmas and birthdays are always a really big book giving time. Me and my husband started a tradition a few years ago where we always get a birthday book. So every year on our birthdays, we go to the store and we each get to pick out a book that the other person buys for them as their birthday book. So we always do that. And then at Christmas, I always have a huge list of books that I put on my list. I find often they're easy for people to buy because you can just give them the title and they go and they find them. And it's very simple. So I get given a lot of books. Because of that as well, the majority of the books that I buy or that I am given are books that I have not read. They are books that I am interested in, books that I have been waiting for, a lot of them. So I will often end up with the second book of series in owning the second book of a series, but not the first book of the series. I know, Crane, I can see you cringing. Just because I will have read the first book of the series from the library and then know that I really want to read the second one. So I will do that. I know. Yeah. I'm waiting for the comments.
Horrifying. Horrifying.
She's read it already. It's not like she just jumped to reading the second book. She just doesn't have
matter. she just has a bookshelf full of like book 2 and book 3, and they're not complete, and the sets are like missing bits.
But you also have to keep in mind, Karine. What was that, Liz?
Will you retroactively buy the first book once you've obtained the second or third book?
See, I won't, because as Kareem pointed out, I don't reread books. And so I have no reason to go back to the first book and get it, because I'm probably not going to reread it. So
Yeah, I'm
Makes
appalled
sense.
as well.
No, makes sense.
I need to lie down.
You can't see our facial expressions. We're all processing this information from City.
yeah. So I see Virginia supports me.
Yep,
Fiona
yep.
and Karine do not. Liz,
No.
Liz, are you no?
If you have book 2, I feel like it's not complete if you don't have the previously published books. But that's just my opinion, and apparently also
No, that's
Corinne's
fair.
and
Yeah,
Fiona's,
and
but-
Fiona's. And Fiona's. Virginia, you understand though? You understand? Thank you.
Get what you can, right?
Yeah. Because I feel like if someone's gonna give me, because like I said, they're usually gifts, so I'm not gonna ask for the first book of a series and the second book of a series, because I'm
You're
only
not
gonna
gonna
read the
read them.
second book of the first of the series.
Exactly.
I feel ill.
Who would have thought this would be such a controversial question?
Liz.
I
Because
know.
it's a bananas thing to do. I couldn't even conceive of a person doing this before this moment.
If you like, I can give you a list, Karine, and you can fill in the
Fill out
gaps
the gaps?
of my,
Yeah.
of my series.
It's that horrifying, that disgusting.
But they've got to be
I'll see
the
that.
same edition.
Thank
Because
you.
that's horrible when you're like,
Sure.
yeah, you have
That's
one
fair.
book and it's like this big and it has a particular cover, and then the second one's like this
That I
big.
could understand. That I
Yeah,
could
that I
understand.
get.
It's just wrong.
Oh my goodness.
I can't tell if Karine has frozen in that position or if she is just
that's
that
just your
horrified
face.
that
Yeah.
that
That
is
horrified,
so
she's stuck in that face. She can't get out of it. Liz,
I'm gonna
tell
need
us what you think. Do you buy books?
I used to very rarely buy books. Most of the books that I had bought would be more of a reference book, so cookbooks being a big one. Something that I would, again, go to all the time because I recap from last week, I don't reread books, so cookbooks are a good one. But I have been occasionally buying more books now. So books I've either really loved and I hope to one day go back to, or I actually did buy a book that I haven't read yet recently. It's just one that I really do want to read and want to be able to flip through whenever I want. So opinions change, habits change.
What is that book, Liz? That special book?
It's the Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories. Yeah, so I figure there's probably something in there, at least one story in there that I would like. And I do like reading short stories, so I know it's not for everybody, but yeah. So that's that. Gosh, had no idea this would be so controversial. But thank you, everybody, for your opinions, your very strong opinions.
Everything is controversial here.
Karine is giving Sadie dagger eyes, and it's
I
very
know.
impressive because like she's on a different screen,
I know.
so she somehow figured out a way to look in the right direction to give Sadie dagger
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm feeling it. I am feeling it.
It's not you, it's your choices.
That makes me feel so much better.
Well, on that note, I don't think the strong opinions will die down because I see Fiona's book coming up has already elicited some strong opinions from some of us. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So just to introduce, we will be talking about books by authors of Asian descent. So with that, Fiona, please share your highly controversial book with us.
I'm excited to find out what is controversial about it. So I chose, oh, you can't see the lettering. Ooh. Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Namju Cho. And to give some context, Kim Jiyoung is, I guess, like the most popular woman's name in Korea, so it would be like Jane Doe. So essentially the concept of the book is that it is looking at everyday sexism through a regular woman's story. So sort of like the most basic life story. And it's interesting because if you talk about the plot of the book, there's not a lot to say. It's essentially a woman, when we first meet her, she's 33 years old and she has one child. We learn a lot about her mother and sister. We see her as she gets her first job, when she graduates college, as she has more children and gets married. But there's not like a whole lot of huge plot points. But it's actually a fascinating and excellent book. It's such a good way to look at sexism, I think, because it just really gives this sort of baseline experience of the sexism that women face in South Korea. And of course, a lot of that was something that I could identify with here in Canada. So there was, this is a best-selling novel in Korea. It got a lot of attention and it's been translated into many, many languages, but it also got a lot of backlash. I think another author wrote a book about men and sort of like doing the exact same thing, and that was his response to it, was, oh, here's all this reverse sexism that happens. If you can look, if you look through this lens, you can totally do the opposite as well. And I believe there's been some sort of like public scrutiny of public figures who have read this and then sort of been put in this camp of, oh, you're just a feminist and you're twisting truths. I found it to be very powerful, but again, not in a way that it was just very calm. But there were sections of it that you just, she was just describing the things that happened to her, and it was that moment of, oh yes, I know that, I've had that experience. Especially when she has kids and she can no longer go to work because she has to stay and care for the kids, and it creates complications in her relationship with her husband. And I just, found that to be identifiable with the North American experience of women who sort of, who may be held back in their careers because they are just automatically seen as a primary caregiver for children. It was really neat because it had some actual like statistics and newspaper articles put in footnotes. I really appreciated that attention to detail, and it all is done in this frame of she's actually having like a psychological break, and developing or embodying multiple personalities, and her husband is very upset and sends her to a psychologist, and the frame is through the psychologist hearing about her life. So I would recommend it to everyone. It was really interesting to learn more about Korean culture and everyday life, but it was also very, very identifiable. I would love to hear what Kareem and Liz thought about it, because I know that they both read it. And like, I just felt like, oh wow, that was really well done. This is fantastic. And apparently they've had very strong feelings.
Always strong feelings, always. Yeah, no, I agree with your assessment. It's a very short book. Like, I'd almost call it a novella in a way, because it reads very fast. But you do really, it's a slow read because you have to take a lot of time to put it down and just scream endlessly, deeply, and fiercely after a lot of the passages. Liz?
Like I agree it's scream worthy, but I feel also depending on like what the individual reader has gone through, maybe that kind of colors what I've read. So I didn't feel like screaming through it, but I think also it's because it sounds like we're in like it's sort of like a little psychological chat session here, but maybe it's because I felt like a lot of stuff in my life, as a person of color and also as a woman, has been very screen worthy. So because the book was written from the point of view of a person of color, well, to us, but in her society, it's quite a homogenous society. So her lens was primarily from like a feminist point of view. So less internal screaming for me.
I also feel I've had some distance from the book, and I do remember like just feeling sad for a lot of the time that I read it. And then it's been a couple like months, and now I'm just able to be like, oh yeah, okay, you read it now. It's your turn. Everybody else, you can feel these feelings.
Yeah, definitely interesting though to get that point of view from somebody who lives in a different culture and learn about what perhaps women in that culture go through. So thank you, Fiona. Now for something a bit different, quite a bit different, somewhat different, Corrine has something for us.
Yeah, so on a very different track, but no less like a conversation. So I think like many settlers in Canada and in the United States, I kind of grew up reading Little House on the Prairie and like being enchanted by the idea of like growing food and gardening and making log cabins and all that kind of thing, which is hilarious that the DIY aspect really appealed to me when I grew up to be not a very crafty person and definitely not a gardener. And then it's one of those books that as you kind of grow and learn and come back to an adult and you kind of see all the flaws and problems with the narrative and kind of like the world that it is describing. So it's very interesting to me to see that from a lot of authors, there's this kind of growing response to the series, response to the books. And so the book that I chose to talk about for this category is in many ways a direct response to Little House on the Prairie by a Newbery medalist and kind of, she's a lion of middle grade literature, Linda Sue Park. I am choosing to talk about Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park. So it is about our main character named Hannah, and it is about 1880, so kind of around the same time that Little House on the Prairie is happening. And Hannah wants to go to school. She wants to get an education. She wants to become a dressmaker. So she lives with her father in a large city. Her mother has passed away. And this kind of happens throughout her entire life, that she finally feels like she's getting settled. She asks her father to go to school and he says no. And she thinks she finally has her chance when they pick up from a larger town and move to a very, very small town in Dakota Territory. And when she arrives, she again asks her father if she can go to school. And this time he says, maybe. She finds out that after her request, her father goes to kind of the mayor and they have a big town meeting about whether or not Hannah can go to school. And this is because Hannah's father is white and Hannah's mother was Chinese. So in order for her to go to school, to get an education, to get something that most children at that time didn't want, an entire town meeting is convened and every adult from all around the county attends. Hannah sneaks into this meeting because she's curious what they're talking about, and she realizes that there are kind of two camps within the town: those that are interested in making sure that she never attends, and those that are willing to give it as an experiment. She finally gets her way. She comes to class for the first time, and she realizes that half of the students did not show up this day. So it is a book that kind of combines what I would see as kind of like a social justice lens for kids. So Hannah's eyes are slowly opened to kind of the larger world around her, not only her story, but the story of the First Nations people whose land that they are colonizing. But it is also combines that the little bits about Little House on the Prairie that we loved, the friendships, the meeting new people, the connection with nature, the kind of handsy DIY crafty stuff. And it's a wonderful book about a girl kind of finding her place in the world and carving out her own space. I think that if you like this, or if you're looking for, again, kind of an alternative to Little House on the Prairie, Louise Erdrich has done the Birch Bark House series, which is written from a First Nations perspective. And I believe there are 4 books in that. And I think that there's this wonderful conversation and dialogue emerging that is trying to be a little bit more realistic, a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more aware of the narrative of history that we are teaching to young children. And I think that this book is a wonderful example of that. And I think it's going to be up for the Newbery Award come February. And I will be in its corner cheering.
Excellent. Thanks, Corinne. Nice to see some diverse historical fiction coming out, not just for adults, but also for young adults and children. And next up, we have Virginia with another book by an author of Asian descent.
Well, I'm pretty sure my strategy, and maybe Sadie's strategy, is also for this Spaceopoly book chat, is that there's no fantasy category. How can we fit fantasy in here? That's kind of what I was trying to do. So the one that I picked, and again, not just because it's a fantasy book doesn't mean that it doesn't have certain themes that we look for in these books. So we have J City by Fonda Lee. This is book 1 in the Greenbone series. This one won the World Fantasy Award, among others. And book 2 is already out, equally amazing. And book 3 should be out coming next year. Eagerly waiting for that. So this has been described as the Godfather with magic and martial arts. It is set in an Asian-inspired world in the island of Kekon. And the island has been fighting against invaders for years and years. And they have the Greenbone warriors who ultimately won the war for them. And what these warriors can do is they could use Jade to augment and add to their power. So they were very good fighters. But of course, like many Asian, sort of stories, if you read a lot of like the shonen manga, you know that it's all about the training. It's all about like, working hard. And it's definitely a lot of that. So you can't just use Jade, like magically. There's definitely consequences for the power that you get. You have to train really hard. You have to be very disciplined because it's very easy. You very easily can get addicted to the power, and then it will overcome you and it will kill you. So it's kind of a very dangerous kind of magic that we have here. But after the war, the islanders, they started turning towards like, well, what do we do now? And so they wanted to establish themselves as a really strong trading kind of partner. And so they're all vying for power to control the jade production and also to export Jade to other places, and not everybody agree on what they should do. So there's 2 clans that kind of like gain power out of this, and they are like kind of fighting each other. There is the No Peak clan, and there's also the Mountain clan. Both of the clans are going through sort of a leadership change right now because you've got the old war heroes that have fought in the war and they are being respected and revered, but now they are kind of retired. So now a new generation of leaders have to reestablish themselves in a different world. So the story follows the 3 siblings in the No Peak clan. We have Lan, who is sort of the level-headed, the perfect diplomat, and he's the pillar. He's the head of the clan, but it's really difficult for him because his grandfather is still there. All the old advisors that he worked with are still there. And so everybody kind of like don't really respect him yet. He hasn't established himself. So he's trying to find a way to gain that respect from his followers. Then there's Hilo, who is the complete opposite, the impulsive, the hot-headed, the one who's the enforcer. He's the one who's going to fight all the street battles with the other clans, and to protect his what they own, and he's fiercely loyal to his family. He would do anything to protect them. And then there's Shay. Shay is the sister who has equal training in everything. She's just as good as all of them, and Hilo and her brothers, but she doesn't want anything to do with the family business. She's kind of a little bit of a rebel. She decided to study abroad, and when she came back, she wants to not be involved in any of the family business. She wants to be herself, and just like try to use her own powers to establish herself, independently. So the story sort of follows the three of them in this sort of new world where they have to kind of figure out sort of what's what. And I think what really draw me to the book is not just that it's a fantasy, but it's a very character-driven fantasy, that, especially in the second book, I think it get even more character-driven, despite all the really, really awesome fight scenes that are in here. Fonda Lee herself is a black belt martial artist, so she can really, really translate all that stuff into her books, really great action scenes. But it's also very much about the characters and their internal struggles to like become like, who they want to be. I grew up with a lot of the Hong Kong action movies, the Hong Kong triad movies, and also all the martial arts novels. So this is very familiar to me in some ways. I feel like it's really sort of it talks about a culture that I'm familiar with, that I grew up with, and it's not just the setting, but I think a lot to do with the values. Very like I can't speak for, of course, all the other so many different Asian cultures out there, but this is very much like the values that I was taught when I was young. It's all about family, it's all about tradition, it's about honor, about respect, about doing what your family wants you to do, following their orders, respecting the hierarchy, respecting, like the elders and all of that. And it's really hard. It's very challenging to become an adult yourself and to sort of figure out where you want to be and follow your own path, as opposed to following what everybody tells you that you're supposed to do. So I really do sympathize with the characters in here. I totally feel their struggle. I know exactly what that's like, to live in a culture where it's very strong on that kind of tradition. So I feel like for me, this is like something super familiar in so many ways. And it's also really good, I think, introduction to a different kind of culture. If you want a fantasy that is not set in like, I don't know, medieval Europe, this is a good one to try out. This has also been recently optioned to be a TV series, so you'll soon be able to watch this on TV. So before you do that, maybe you want to pick up the book. This is J City by Fonda Lee.
Thanks, Virginia. It's exciting to hear that that's been optioned for the screen. Might have to pick that one up before it hits that screen. So thank you very much. Now, Sadie, what do you have in store for us today?
So yes, Virginia, you are definitely correct. I do whatever I can to fit a fantasy book into the theme of pretty much whatever I'm reading. So this was one I actually did pick up before we started Spaceopoly, but it does fit nicely into our theme. And this book is called Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. And it is takes place in a fantasy world that is structured and based around historical Japan. And it focuses a lot on the samurai culture and the samurai tradition, and as well as Japanese and Asian mythology. And so this book follows a young woman named Yumeko, and Yumeko is a half human, half kitsune, which is a shapeshifter fox. And Yumeko was taken in by a temple of monks when she was a young child, and her whole life she has been trained by these monks to hide her kitsune nature. Kitsune are seen as very mischievous. They're tricksters. They have the power of illusion, so they can make themselves look different ways as well as make other people view things in different ways. And because that, they are not seen as being honorable. They're not seen as being respectable. And so Yumeko has had to hide her kitsune nature her whole life. So one day, Yumeko is out in the forest, and she comes back to the temple that she lives at, the Silent Winds Temple, to find it under attack. And it is being attacked by a horde of demons, and they are being led by one gigantic, very high up level demon. She manages to use her magical abilities to sneak inside and find the monks who had raised her, and they are all in this room trying to hold off this demon, but they are failing. With their last breath, her mentor tells her that she is now in charge of this piece of scroll, this ancient piece of scroll. He gives it over to her and says that she must protect it at all costs, and she must get it to another temple that is hidden. No one knows where this temple is, but he tells her someone who can help her, and it's her responsibility now to get this scroll to that person who will then get it to the temple. So she says goodbye to the only family that she has ever known, leaves them, unfortunately, to their fate against the demon, and she runs out of the temple. Now, outside of the temple, she meets up with Kage Tatsumi, and Kage is a samurai, and he is a samurai for the very mysterious Shadow Clan. And Kage carries a magical sword that is possessed, I suppose would be the best word, by an ancient demon. So the demon has been trapped inside this blade, which makes it a very, very powerful weapon, but also makes Kage very susceptible to have the demon take over him whenever he uses the sword. So he has been tasked by the Shadow Clan to also find this scroll. And so that is why he is at the temple. He was going to find the scroll, but came upon its destruction instead. Yumeko, knowing that she will not be able to find this person and get to this temple by herself, since she has never left her temple and knows nothing of the outside world, she manages to convince Kage to help her, telling him that she does not have the scroll but knows where it is, and if he helps her, then she will tell him where the scroll is. So they go off to find this person who can get them to the temple, and as well as find the scroll that Yumeko claims she does not have. So the backstory of this is 1,000 years ago, the great Kami dragon was summoned with this scroll and granted one terrible, terrible wish. And this wish plunged the land into destruction and death and war for many, many years. If the scroll is put back together, the three pieces, if they are reunited, then the Kami dragon will be summoned again, and the horrible, horrible wish could potentially doom their country and their world forever. So Yumeko and Kage go off in search of this people. They are chased by demons, by other people who are trying also to get the scroll. They are both keeping secrets from each other, not really knowing if they can trust the other person, but needing to rely on them in order to complete their task. So it is a very fast-paced book. The characters I found really engaging. Yumeko is a very, I could connect with her quite a bit. Kind of the fact that she's hiding her secret as well as trying to learn about the world around her, I found really compelling. And yeah, I would just recommend it to anyone. It's a culture and a tradition I don't know a lot about, so it was really interesting to learn more about the samurai tradition in that part of the world. So I would definitely recommend it. It, once again, is the first book of a series. So I tend to stick to series if I can. I have yet to read the second one, but I have had it on hold through Libby for quite a few months and have been delaying it as other books come up that I've been reading. So as soon as I am ready and have read all the rest of the books for Spaceopoly, I will be going back to that series, and I'm very, very excited.
Sounds like a series.
Looks like we need to get you that book too.
Yes, right? So if anyone wants to buy me, that book too. Sounds
like a series I might actually get into. Maybe I'll find that in the
I absolutely loved it. I didn't know anything about it, so I was happily surprised.
That's always the best, when you're very pleasantly surprised by what you're reading.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for our last book of the day, so still talking about books by authors of Asian descent, I also have a book by a author from Japan, or of Japanese heritage, and that takes place in Japan. So the book I decided to share today is Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. I frequently will mention Haruki Murakami is my favorite author. I love his books. I will read almost anything that he's published. So I thought, what better opportunity to actually talk about this author and one of his, I guess, seminal books. So his works have been translated into 50 languages, that's 50, and he's arguably the most famous author to come out of Japan, most famous internationally. I wouldn't say this book is for everybody. It's very epic, it's very metaphysical, and it's been described as a subgenre of magical realism. So if you're able to suspend your belief, not question everything that goes on, then you just may be able to enjoy this one. So we've got two primary characters in Kafka on the Shore, and one is the titular Kafka. His name is Kafka Tamura. He's only 15 years old, and the book opens with him running away from home. Now he encounters an older man who takes on part-time work locating lost cats. And he is very good at this job because he can actually talk to cats. He can talk to them in their language and they can respond, and he can understand them. So as you can tell, this world is a little bit different from the one that we live in. It's not only a world where people can speak to cats, but also where fish fall from the sky, and also spirits can leave people's bodies to do other things and then come back into those bodies. So the fate of the two, this unlikely pair, this younger man and older man, they're drawn together. Their personalities are drawn together and their fates happen to be intertwined. So their stories are told in alternating chapters. And along the way, as they encounter all of these mystical occurrences, maybe even a little bit murder in there, they kind of need each other. And through the story, we see if the older man is able to help Kafka find what he seeks, which was the catalyst of him running away from home. This was a book that I read quite a while ago, but it's something that really sticks with you, I feel. Again, it's not for everybody, but I feel that it was a great book to share because it, personally, I feel it's one of Murakami's greatest works, and it's also classic Murakami. So talking about life and thoughts, sort of dabbling into, again, the metaphysical, spirituality, but not necessarily talking about spirituality and religion directly. It's true Murakami. If you are thinking of reading this author and aren't sure about all the metaphysical bits yet, as a gateway, you might want to try some of his books of short stories. Those are a bit more, I guess, accessible, relatable, still with a little bit of magical realism, but lighter on the magic. But again, the true essence of Murakami, I feel, is something that you can find through Kafka on the Shore. Well, thanks everybody
love a good
for
magical
joining
realism.
us. I might be up your alley, Sadie, and
Might be.
especially with the talking cats.
I would say yes, yeah.
It's a fairy list book. Fairy
Yeah.
list book.
It also kind of makes sense in a world where you could talk to cats that fish would fall from the sky. The connection there makes sense to me. Not saying the cats are controlling it, but you never know.
Or maybe they are.
Maybe they are.
Maybe you'll have to read that one to find out.
Yes. I was going to say, Corinne looks skeptical.
All right, before this devolves into yet another argument here on the Port Moody Library's book chat, I want to thank everybody for joining us as we talked about some amazing books that showcased the diversity of what Black authors and also authors of Asian descent have created and put out into the world with their own voices. So thanks everybody for joining us. We hope you'll join us next week for another book chat. Bye for now.
Bye.